Hi and welcome back to the channel. My name is Jess and today we're actually going to make 3 different types of soups. And I'm just going to be completely upfront and honest. I am not the biggest fan of soups, so I really wanted to try to find some soups that I would actually enjoy because it's just the perfect meal on a cold winter's day as we're going into fall, especially if it's rainy and you just want a bowl of soup. You know, even if it's not your go-to meal, like sometimes you just crave a bowl of soup. So I really wanted to try to find some soups that actually make me feel like I've eaten some dinner. So in this video, we're going to be trying 3 different soups, and the first one is a creamy tortellini soup. I am actually a pretty big fan of lasagna soup, and I thought this would be similar, but with a new and interesting twist. I would say for all 3 soups, I think best practice would be to have all the ingredients already prepared because I found that once you got started, they kind of went fast. So for the creamy tortellini soup, you add your oil and butter into a large saucepan over medium heat, and then once all that's melted, you add your onions and you just cook those for about 5 minutes, stirring occasionally. And then you're going to add your garlic. Now this step I actually messed up a little bit. You're supposed to add your flour and then cook another minute. I ended up adding the broth before I did that, but it really did not make a difference. However, in the recipe you are supposed to stir in the flour and then you add your broth, tomatoes, sauce, and seasonings. Now I just used tomato sauce. I did not use any diced tomatoes. Once again, just not my favorite thing. So I edit recipes, to make it more pleasurable for myself. Then you're going to bring the soup to a gentle boil and add your tortellini and cook that for a couple minutes until the pasta is tender, and then you remove it from the heat, and that's when you're going to stir in your spinach, your Parmesan cheese, and the cream. I thought this soup was so tasty. It was hearty and you felt like you were actually eating something and not just like liquid. Also for this soup, you had the option to add sausage based on some of their notes, and I highly recommend adding sausage. That's what we did. We just browned it quickly, and I just felt like it gave it this meatiness, this heartiness that I think really elevated the soup. So I highly suggest adding sausage. The next soup was an ultimate potato soup recipe. That's literally the title. My mom has been using this recipe forever, and we all, really, really like it. Now, I have to say it's not the easiest soup recipe in my opinion, but it's not extremely hard. You do have to get an immersion blender or blend part of the soup to make it more of like a creamy sauce. It just gives it this rich thickness to the soup. So like I said earlier, I started out by prepping all my ingredients, but one of the first steps you're going to do after your prepped ingredients is cook your bacon. You cut it up into really small pieces, and you are going to just saute that and get it really, really crispy. You do want to leave some of the fat in the pot. Now I did take some of it out because I just thought it was way too much, so I removed a little bit of the leftover fat from the bacon. But then you're going to chop up your onions and add that. Then you're going to add your garlic, sprinkle some flour into the pot, and then you finally will add those diced potatoes along with the chicken broth, milk, heavy cream, salt and pepper, and whatever seasonings you choose to use. Now it calls for ancho chili powder. I just used paprika, salt and pepper, and some Italian seasoning. I also added some red pepper flakes just to add like some good spice to it. But you are going to bring that to a boil and cook the potatoes until they're tender. It says about 10 minutes, and I think that's about how long it took. Now, you do cut your potatoes up small, so it really shouldn't take more than 10 minutes. your potatoes are tender and cooked, you will remove about half of the soup. Now it is crazy hot, so be careful. Then it calls for an immersion blender, and you just blend up half the soup and pour it back in the pot. Then you're going to add your sour cream and add some of the bacon on top, and you are good to go. Honestly, this soup has always been kind of one of my favorites for soups. You just feel like you're actually eating food. I don't know why soup sometimes feels like it's just kind of like liquid, and I tend to be hungry within an hour after eating it, but this is not one of those type soups. It's heavy, it's warm, it's hearty. It is just a delicious soup. And you can kind of choose whatever toppings you want. My sister really likes chives, so she cut some of those up. I just put a little bit of extra cheese and crispy bacon. And like I said, the soup turned out delicious. Finally, we ended on a chicken broccoli cheddar soup. I will be completely transparent that I did not follow the directions exactly, and I used mozzarella instead of American cheese because I don't really love using American cheese. However, I do think that was a mistake. There is a reason why they say to use American cheese in the recipe, and I do think you probably could do all sharp cheddar, but you really do need that melting consistency, and the mozzarella just didn't melt the way that you wanted it to. But you start off once again by caramelizing some onions, and then you add some julienne carrots, and you just cook that down in butter and oil. And I actually used my cheese grater for the carrots, and it worked perfectly. I forgot to film it, so I can't show you, but it did work really, really well. Then you add a little bit of flour and stir that. Finally adding the chicken broth, where you actually are going to scrape up the brown bits on the bottom for the flavor. Then you add your broccoli and you let that cook for about 10 minutes. Then you finally will add your cream, your cheese, and you just let that cook down for another 10 minutes. This soup tasted delicious. I do recommend this particular recipe. However, I would say follow the recipe exactly, or use a better melting cheese than mozzarella. I hope that you enjoyed this video and it gives you some good ideas for soups, and it gives you some good ideas if you're like me and you don't necessarily love soup, but you really want to love soup, especially one that's going to kind of stay with you and make you feel full, and you're just going to get all the warm vibes during the soup season.